This is the Can Report, and I'm your host, Bill Beck. Since we are smack dab in the middle of Fire Prevention Week, I've decided to talk to Brock Weilever. Brock Weilever is a fire marshal for the City of Waterloo. Brock and I discuss what exactly a fire marshal does, as well as the training it takes to become one. We also discuss how fire prevention assemblies in school have changed over the years, whether they are effective learning tools or not, and plenty more. I hope you enjoy this episode. We're here with Brock Weilever. Brock Weilever is the current fire marshal with Waterloo Fire Rescue. Thanks for coming in, Brock.
Yes, thanks for having me.
This isn't probably the greatest lunch hour you've ever had, but hopefully you'll get something to eat in between.
Well, happy to accommodate you here. So,
let's talk a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up?
I'm local. I grew up here, Waterloo, Cedar Falls area for most of my life. I started off grade school at Kittrell Elementary, and then things happened. And went to St. John, St. Nick's, and then on to Columbus for high school.
Very good. Your dad is a former firefighter.
Yes.
Retired as captain, Steve Weilever.
Correct, yes.
Most people knew him as Doc.
Yeah, so he was hired on Waterloo Fire, I think, shortly before I was born. I was born in 1980, and I think he was hired on in 1979, I believe. So, yeah, I grew up knowing the fire industry.
You went to, you said Columbus.
Yes.
Graduated.
Yes.
What happened after Columbus?
After Columbus, I decided I needed a little bit of a break, so I took some time off, was working, then decided that the Army was probably the best route for me to go. So I enlisted into the U.S. Army, did 4 years there, was actually deployed twice. 2002, we went over to Afghanistan, and then 2003, we're into Iraq. Part of the 82nd Airborne Division. And then following that, I did get out in 2004 and proceeded to go to Hawkeye Community College for approximately a year. And that's when I learned about an opening with Waterloo Fire Rescue where they were conducting the hiring process, and put in my application, took the test, and succeeded in getting hired on that first time around. So
nice job.
Yeah.
What were you going to go to Hawkeye for? What were you taking classes for?
Well, initially that wasn't the route I was going to go. After we got back from deployment in Afghanistan, I had about a year left with the Army, and I was putting in applications for Border Patrol. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a common thing that a lot of the military does talk about, transitioning into other federal jobs like that. So I was all geared up, lined up to take that Border Patrol test, and then we got orders to go over to Iraq. So had to cancel that test. Yeah. Those plans kind of fell through, and other things happened, and here we are.
Mm-hmm. So hired on in 2005.
Correct.
And you went to paramedic school probably about as soon as you could.
Yes. Yeah, so I was... Back then, the city did pay for us to go through paramedic school. I believe you and Josh Heller were the two candidates to go from shift that had been on probably for a little bit, and then they had troubles at that time. I can't remember exactly what happened, but they needed a third candidate to go to paramedic school, and I volunteered. Still roughly about that year time frame, and they did kind of give me that waiver and say, yeah, you're cleared to go.
Yep.
I just had to. We had one from A shift already, which was Heller. You were on B shift, I think, at the time, so I took a voluntary transfer to C shift, and so we had one covered from each shift to go to paramedic school.
Would you say that your time as a paramedic was well spent?
Oh yes, yeah. I spent about a decade on as assigned paramedic. I think it was just shy of a decade. 1 year as a swing medic approximately, and then the remainder of those years as it was started out as 338, but then Station 8 closed, and we opened up Station 2 and renumbered it to 332.
So of the three of us, of Josh, you, and I, you certainly spent the most time on the ambulance of the three of us.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys pretty much took all the tests that you could right away, and I just wasn't ready at that point in time to make that transition out. I just didn't feel confident that I was ready to step into a leadership role on a fire truck at that point in time. That all kind of changed. I was sitting there at 332, and all these younger hires were coming through, tailboarding twos and asking me questions. And you look around, and it feels like you've got a day on the job, and you're answering technical questions to these new hires here, and then you kind of then take a step back, to that 10,000 foot view, and like, whoa, hey, here I am. I'll have, when I reach retirement age at 55, I'll approximately have about 30 years on, and there I was sitting there, about a third of the way through, going, maybe this is a time in my career where I need to seriously think about taking these promotional exams and doing that. So a lot of that started with taking the engineers tests, and then finally getting myself ready to take the lieutenant's test.
Yeah, I've had that same 1,000-foot view. Well, just a couple weeks ago. I've only got 25% of my career left in this, and it was literally a cup of coffee ago. I was a brand new kid. I thought. Oh,
right.
It goes that quick.
And you hear that from a lot of they're all retired now, but they seem to be middle-aged, middle career type guys. Like, hey, kid,
yeah,
you blink and you're going to be right where I am. And
right.
That was part of my thing as I was younger. Taking advice from older people, I took it with a grain of salt. And here you are, in that position.
Yeah,
that kid ain't listening to me. But so hopefully that's one message that gets put through, is that whatever you can get from these older firemen, or take something from them.
Yeah.
There's a vast array of knowledge out there, and now they're looking to us for that knowledge.
Right.
Hopefully we do a good enough job of passing that on.
Yeah. So you took the lieutenant's test.
Yes.
And at that same time, an opening came up in the Fire Prevention Bureau as an inspector.
Correct.
Which is for Waterloo, it's a lieutenant graded job.
Yes.
What made you decide to go that route?
I was doing a lot. It seemed at that point in time I was doing a lot of testing, so I was just done with testing, and I ended up being middle of the pack on that lieutenant's test. And I think it was a 3-year list, possibly. May have been, most of the time it's 2. This one could have been a 3-year list, and sitting there at shift during those down times, everybody has sort of a plan of what's going to happen. It rarely happens that way, but you kind of have an idea of. There's going to be 3 retirements, or 3 positions trickling down here or there. So, and you look at it and you say, oh, well, if I want to take a position, I might have to think about doing something different. And Fire Prevention Bureau does offer something completely different than what most of us on the line, it's either medic or it's, eating smoke, putting fires out. So we try to do things on the front end of things, of fire prevention, going through and doing commercial building inspections. That really hadn't dawned on me, throughout I think I had 13 years on when I went into the Fire Prevention Bureau. I knew when I got hired on, there was 2 part-time retired firefighters that were conducting building inspections. And then throughout the course of politics and budget cuts and everything else, we ended up losing those. And then I think the building department kind of created a position to fill some of these areas that were missing and lacking within the city. And so budgets come and budgets go, and we were able to get a fire inspector position back. And it just happened to be something that I was, interested and willing to do.
Right. Fire prevention is, it's what we all, the common person would say, it's like, well, shouldn't the whole fire department be part of fire prevention? Well, absolutely. What we need to look at is we can have that house fire come in, and the fire trucks can go out there, and we can put it at some sort of nominal risk 17 individuals and $4 million worth of equipment, and we have a great stop, and it was stopped at a room and contents fire. Now that homeowner has a room and contents fire aftermath to deal with. If we would have put more money towards prevention beforehand, would that fire have never started? In which case, now isn't that even better firefighting? We don't think of it necessarily that way as a tax base or even just as a person. We think of fire prevention as nothing more than smoke detectors and 2 ways out of your house.
Right. That's one of those tangible areas that's really hard to, get statistics on. How many fires did you prevent this year? Well, you don't know that number.
Exactly.
Nor do I think you can ever know that number. And that's where a lot of the education comes through. And, again, there's been money budget issues every year. That's one of the things that, city councils have to take into account. But also on the other side of things, we live in a technology-driven age where there are all sorts of resources out there, through the public library here or just YouTube channels of, other departments that are teaching things, and we just need to be able to tap into some of that sometime or get that information out there. It's already been, gone over all that information. Hey, look, we're coming into the cold season here in the northern, part of America. We're all going to start heating our houses again. We're all going to, there's all sorts of ways that people do that.
Yeah.
And, hey, these are the ways to keep yourself safe during this, because fires do go up in the cooler seasons as people do try to stay warm from any shape or form out there. So,
right. Getting into the Fire Prevention Bureau requires a lot more education. What have you had to take as far as classes go to be up to speed?
So on the code enforcement side of things, the city adopts the International Code Council's International Fire Code and the International Building Code and all those similar code topics. And so I've had to go through the International Code Council, Fire Inspector 1, Fire Inspector 2, getting familiar with the code. If you sit down and try to read the code cover to cover, it's going to put you to sleep in a heartbeat. it's just
not meant
to
be read.
No.
Yeah.
And here recently, the Iowa Fire Service Training Bureau has offered a fire inspector curriculum again through the State Training Bureau. So we did have one of our newest inspector go through that program with them. I did not have that opportunity to do that. It wasn't offered at that time, but they did give me the reciprocity credits for it. So, and then just taking various other continuing ed topics on that are conferences on that, certain aspects of the code. Definitely help with that. I didn't go to school specifically for fire prevention or fire code. You can take associate's degrees and do some online training as far as that goes. I know there's quite a few courses or colleges that do offer that program if that's an interest. I certainly didn't see myself as a child being a fire marshal in the Fire Prevention Bureau. Can't honestly say that I saw myself being a firefighter at that time. I just knew that it was something my dad did. If you were to ask me what I wanted to do when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut at that point in time. But here we are.
Yeah. So a typical day for the fire marshal, what's that consist of?
It varies. It can vary real quickly depending on what emails you receive overnight or what phone calls you receive in the morning. But I did highlight a few of the general areas: code enforcement, plan review, new construction inspections, existing construction inspections, fire investigations, community education, fire department education and training, Fire Prevention Bureau administration, citizen complaints, and community support. So, going to the fire investigation side of things, that's just something we get a special invite for. That's what the fire service does. We're there. We're ready to respond to emergencies within the community, and we give our battalion chiefs quite a bit of leeway when those fires do come in. That, hey, if you're able to put a finger on it and find out what happened, what the origin and cause was, by all means, hang your hat on it, call it a day. If not, if you're having problems figuring it out, if this is something that looks like, maybe ending up in court, call us in, and we'll come help you out, and we'll go from there. So, yeah, it just depends. Some nights I remember there was, 3 investigations. It just we've been in knock on wood, haven't had too many here as of recently. I think what we've all been through the last couple of years, I think people kind of took a stock of what they had and what they put value in, and took care of their things a little better over the last couple of years. And fires still happen, but
Yeah.
some of those other causes, weren't the origin and cause of those fires.
Right.
So
One thing to keep in mind is, you can have a perfectly scheduled day planned in your mind as you're driving in the morning, and it takes exactly one fire call to change all of that.
oh, right.
Not only do you do all the inspections part of it as well, but you alluded to you do the investigation as well. So I have a fire come in. We're getting to the point of I'm starting to do my preliminary investigation as a battalion chief. And A and B don't equal C, or I can't see C in all the trouble. Then I'll call you in, and despite whatever you may have planned on for the day, now you're going to be invested with me on a call. One of the things I really like, the things that you're doing, is we've branched out to not only you, or not only the fire investigator, J.D. Van Dyke, coming to it, but we also have gotten to the point where we've educated some line personnel to at least get things started. So if you're in the middle of a testing for a new construction, I can call someone else in. They can get all the wheels in motion so that either they can control it on their own, or they can find out where C is, or they can, once you get on scene, they can quickly get you up to speed.
Oh, certainly. When I started in the Fire Prevention Bureau, it was the fire marshal at that time, Chris Ferguson, and me were the only ones conducting origin and cause investigations. And right now we have 3. We're working on our 4th investigator. When I went to the Fire Service Training Bureau for fire investigations course, talking with many of the other jurisdictions out there, a lot of their officers, this is part of their, promotional examination process. You have to have fire investigator. You don't necessarily have to be a certified, continuing to be a certified fire investigator, but you have to have this foundation to be an officer within their ranks. Is that something we're going to get to? I don't know. I would like to see a lot of our officers trained in this. We've had really good luck with sending interested candidates down, so whether or not you want to work in the Fire Prevention Bureau, I would love to have more inspectors and investigators.
Absolutely.
But, we were only given so many positions, and, the chief's, that's ultimately his call where those positions are. If he wants to give me 5 more investigators, I'll take them.
Yeah, we'll find work for you.
We can certainly put them to use. But, if we just get some more, maybe 1 per shift, maybe 5 per shift, or maybe all of our lieutenants on the our frontline engines, maybe they are all trained to that investigator standard. I think that would tremendously help out, everybody on our department. But not just knowing where the fire started, but you have to, understand why it started.
Right. I think as firefighters, we do well of just following the natural course of our overhaul. Once the fire's out and we're looking for any extensions of oftentimes finding those really telltale signs, the blackened V that points down to the point of origin, and preserving evidence is probably I would say the max of what a majority line engine company can do as far as the investigation goes.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember being young and on the job, and they say overhaul, and you ripped out every wall almost. And I
Right.
think the whole fire industry has, learned that, that's don't do that. That doesn't need to be done. You're wasting time, you're wasting resources, and potentially destroying evidence. And so, throughout the fire event, yeah, that fire is leaving patterns for you to, put that puzzle back together. And that's what we're trying to do, is piece that puzzle back together. Sometimes you have all but one piece to that puzzle, and sometimes you only have one piece to that puzzle. But just that one piece might be all you need to crack the case. Or we're not necessarily out there making cases against people all the time either. We're trying to find out why fires started, and that's one of the big things you have to keep in mind when you're doing the investigation. Is I live in a 100-plus-year-old house. Not to my knowledge, I don't think there's ever been a significant fire event in that house. So what conditions came together that day, to put, why did fire happen? I can tell you I've got knob and tube wiring in my house. There's still, that old gas tubing in there from the gas lanterns.
Oh, yeah.
So, all those conditions are there, but no fire started in my house. What happened on this particular day that a fire may have started at this house? So those are, keeping an open mind during your investigation. When we show up on scene with you, we try to make face-to-face with the battalion chiefs. However, you might start interviewing somebody that lived there right off the bat, and we got to give them that time to tell us the events of what happened, because that's valuable information, especially right when that event is going on. And that's what we're there to do, is gather all that information. And largely enough, that last person that was at that fire scene has real valuable information for us. So trying to get that person identified, or who witnessed the fire in the first place, or how did that call come in, that's all valuable pieces of that puzzle that we're trying to put in place and see what exactly happened. And, if it was a faulty product out there, somebody from the Consumer Product Safety Commission stopped by my office the other day. So, going into the cooler season here, when space heaters come out,
Right.
Not something we're proponents of, but they do make an appearance here in a few months. So if there is a faulty product out there, and that product did start fires or is causing fires, we have that, not chain of command, but we have that chain of people to notify that, hey, look, you could have a product recall on your hands. Or maybe vice versa, they're sending it back down saying, hey, look, if people in your area are buying product XYZ, you need to put this information out and saying, hey, you need to return this product.
Right.
Eventually, or quite possibly, something terrible could happen to you or your family. So those are things that weigh heavily on your mind sometimes.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some fire prevention. This episode is being broadcast initially on Fire Prevention Week. You, being a Waterloo kid, probably remember the fire trucks coming to school?
Yes, yeah. I think I couldn't tell you what exact time of the year it was when the fire trucks did come, but yeah, I remember the firefighters being there, and I was younger. I was at St. John's at the time, and I think it was that was 3rd or 4th grade, probably that age group.
What are we doing now that we can do better at when it comes to fire prevention, especially with children?
Oh, that is a great question. I would love to have those programs back, or something similar. Putting a fire engine at every school, would be beneficial to everybody. But again, it just depends on the day whether or not we can devote those resources to that. I think that's something we're going to have to come together as a department. And do we offer up field trips to schools, or are we able to find money for putting the one of our members in the classrooms every day, or during that specific time frame, or maybe it's just as simple enough as shooting a podcast like this or an informational video, and having somebody read a book online. I know there's a number of departments that have that program going on where they have their firefighters reading Clifford the Big Red Dog book, and then they disseminate that out to the schools. Mm-hmm. And that might not be something we have to do, but in our jurisdiction, we'd like to have our faces
absolutely
known to our our community. So I mean, there's that possibility.
Mm-hmm. I think we honestly, if we're grading evenly, and honestly, we should give ourselves a D- when it comes to the fire prevention we do in schools. I base that off of a couple different things. One, I remember being in second or third grade in a little bitty country type school where I had 16 kids in my class, the fire truck coming, going through the whole spiel, stop, drop, and roll, don't play with matches. I don't remember any of that. What I remember is the second graders every year got to climb onto the hose bed of the truck, and they would drive us around town with the lights on. Now, in my mind as a battalion chief, I would be screaming at the top of my lungs of the insurance issue and the liability problem of putting 16 8-year-olds on the top of a truck and driving around town. Awesome experience. I remember it to this day. Maybe it helped me want to be a fireman in some subconscious point, but I didn't learn anything about fire safety. I think that program you talked about earlier, it's called Fire Pals. It was called Fire Pals when we had it.
Right.
It was through grant money, and we did have a person in the schools, not only as for the little kids, but it went up into older age brackets as well, I believe. And to have that continual face there, I think is what we really require to have good fire prevention. Everybody likes to get the little plastic helmets. We love giving them out. I know I personally loved going out to the schools to do fire prevention because it was fun. The kids were excited. It was something different that we got to do every day, but I don't know how much of it's actually sticking in their minds.
Right, I agree with you, and I think that's one area we probably have to do a better self-analysis with too. You have the D-, yeah, it could even be worse than that. I'm not sure, but yeah, putting a face out there. We're of the public services, we're one of the friendliest, or favorable right. That in the public's
people
eye.
Call us.
Yeah, people call us to come help solve all sorts of problems that. And yeah, it's a good question of how do we put our faces in front of these kids, and it's not just the second or third graders, but yeah, like the adolescents. I know that in our neighborhood here recently, I witnessed some juvenile kids, mid-teens probably playing with fire at the park. That's not a good thing,
right?
And so, that education needs to be not just second and third grade, but it needs to be middle school and into the high school ranks as well, too, that, safety is a concern for everybody. It helps with longevity.
Right, absolutely. The kid playing in the park with the matches today maybe plays in his backyard tomorrow.
Right.
And maybe that backyard is next to your backyard. We've got to look at the small village, big world picture of it.
Right.
What else? What are we missing?
Well, moving into the cooler seasons where we are heating our houses more. Mm-hmm. I know all of us are on a budget, but maybe you can sacrifice another $1 or $2 a month to, turn your thermostat up a degree or two. Instead of bringing in space heaters, they're not necessarily a bad thing. However, I can't do all the math for you, but most of your space heaters are 1,500 watts. 1,500 watts equals 15 amps. So if you have a 15 amp breaker and that space heater is the only thing on that circuit, you should theoretically be fine. However, it's when you start plugging in extra equipment into that circuit, and if you know the layout of your house, more power to you. But lights, TVs, there's all sorts of things ran off these circuits. So when you plug that 1,500 watt space heater in, you're overloading that circuit, creating a potential overload and hazardous situation in your house. And that's one of the big failure points of those space heaters is anytime you have a connection that's a failure point. Resistance heating causes fires. By their nature, space heaters are resistance heating. That's how they work. So if you have extension cords ran or multi-plug adapters, or if you have those space heaters on, daisy chained, I call them power taps, but surge protectors, you got 5 of those in a row throughout your whole living room there, so you can have all your TVs and laptops and whatever electronic devices you have there. You've got a dangerous situation right there. So maybe make a personal evaluation of your space. Do I have enough outlets? Maybe it's time to call an electrician in.
And I think that's something too for, we see so many of these types of fires in rental properties, whereas the renter comes in, they don't have any idea what kind of circuits they have or what kind of wiring's through it. It's the homeowner, the renter, the rentee, the person that's renting.
Yes,
it's their responsibility to let them know of, this is really good. You should be able to put things in, but also in those rental houses that we go to that are on fire, they're typically older homes that haven't been updated with new insulation, or the furnaces are not maintained the way they should. And they do have those cold zones, typically in bedrooms, where you're going to have the super thin extension cord 2 rooms down, daisy chained together for the bedroom heater.
Yeah, or Christmas lights,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's and when you talk about overloading the circuit, I don't think people necessarily understand. When the circuit's overloading, that wire is getting hot. When they're brand new, it's not as big of an issue because they're insulated and they've got a cover over them. But like you said, in your old home of knob and tube, that's not the case. That insulation's 100 years old as well, and they fail and they break. And if you have a mouse that's in there and they chew it open, now you have an open circuit. Cellulose insulation can catch on fire. A litany of things that can happen.
Yeah, and in and of itself, the old knob and tube isn't dangerous. It's when you start overloading those circuits.
Right.
I mean, there's still a lot of it out there, and I'm not a certified electrician, but I think the good indicator of when your stuff is starting to overheat is, are you continuously going down and flipping the same breaker?
Right.
That should flip off, a red flag in your mind that, hey, something's going on here. It's time to call an electrician. If you are a renter, call your landlord. There's other solutions or
Right.
possibilities out there. Also going along with the rental, it's smoke detectors, smoke alarms. We see a lot of those taken down, and a lot of the fires that we've been in, a couple of the fatal fires here recently that we've gone into, there was no working smoke alarms, smoke detectors in the house at all. And they were, a number of them have been rental properties, and they're required to be in those. No matter what, they're required to be in your house. But in those particular cases, there wasn't working smoke detectors in the house.
Yeah, smoke detectors save lives. That's everyone should have heard that by now because it's the truth.
Right. And I think we do have programs out there for people to contact us, Waterloo Fire Rescue, and we do have smoke detectors available for you. Yep. If
not only do we have them, we'll put them in for you.
Correct.
You have to live in the city. But we want those in the homes.
Yeah, call down to our main station, and we do have staff available to take those calls or get you coordinated to have those installed for you. So, another huge, and I got some, it came off the U.S. Fire Administration website, but in residential structures, 50% of the fires that we are going to nationwide are cooking fires. So, I mean, that's a huge, huge number. 50% of, 1 out of every 2 fire calls, an actual fire is from a cooking related incident.
Right.
So, you should never be warming your house through your oven or your stove. But if you have that oven or stove turned on, don't leave your house. Stay within that immediate area of your kitchen and watch what you're doing on the stove. It goes a long way, And there's other training topics on that as well too. But if you do notice that you do have a fire on your stove, don't throw water on it. It's going to make it worse. That water and that grease don't play together. And there's all sorts of YouTube videos out there. Don't do it at home. And I think even some of our past educational props that we've done with the local news agencies dumping water into oil, and it's just a huge explosion, and it's going to spread that fire. So part of the fire triad or the fire triangle is, you've got your fuel source, you got your oxygen, and then you've got your heat source. So we can't cool it down with water. So what are we going to do? Well, you need to exclude the oxygen, or you need to turn the fuel off. So just simply turning off your stove might take away that heat source for it, and then throw a lid or maybe baking soda or baking powder if you have it available. Rental properties are supposed to have a fire extinguisher there. So if you know where your fire extinguisher's at, that's your other option to use on that. Hopefully it's a dry chem to put on that fire if you're able to do that. Otherwise, get out, and call 911.
Right.
Yeah, we could go on like.
No, I think we did well. I appreciate you coming in over your lunch hour. I'll give you an extra 15 minutes to wolf a sandwich down before you have to go back.
One other topic that goes a long way in fire prevention is your egress out of your building. So a lot of our commercial buildings, or a lot of your commercial apartments or residential buildings, do have fire alarm. They do have fire sprinkler in them, but you've got to have a clear path out. And so that is one big component that we do take pretty serious.
Right.
On the fire inspection side of things. Everywhere has storage issues, whether it's McDonald's or your banks, or they just have not enough space. So you got to keep your egress paths out of your building free and clear. There's been numerous deaths throughout history and throughout our lifetimes, of people not being able just to simply get out of a building when it's on fire. So checking your fire alarms, making sure those are up to date, and making sure that you do have good egress paths out of your building. Those are the basics. At the end of the day, get out and stay out.
Awesome. Fire Marshal Brock Weilever, I appreciate you stopping in today.
Well, thanks for having me.
One thing we didn't get to talk about was the use of arson dogs in the fire service. Currently, Brock does not have a dog, nor is there any talk of getting one in the near future. Arson dogs, as a rule, are expensive and almost always require outside monies to obtain. Here in the Midwest, State Farm Insurance has had the ability to get trained dogs to departments. Waterloo has had 3 arson dogs in its history. Gidget and Ebby were Labrador Retrievers, and Radar was a Golden Retriever. These dogs have a lifespan of 10 to 14 years, but a working life of only 5 to 6 years. The dog also stays with the same trainer its whole life. This means a trainer needs to be more than 6 years from retirement and live in a home that is suitable for a dog. That being said, I am pro-dog in the fire service, as well as a pro-firehouse dog. It's just that the two would have different jobs. Can we also acknowledge the fact that dogs in the fire service are just a lot cooler than dogs in the police service? Fire dogs aren't trained to rip arms off people, nor do they look at you like a coiled spring, hoping you'll run. But I digress. I'd like to thank Brock for being on the show this week. As always, my producer, Angie Beck, for being behind the scenes, and always knowing how to push the right buttons, and Caleb Martin for the original music. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to The Can Report and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at The Can Report on Facebook and Can_Report on Instagram. We've still got some Season 2 stickers available. Hit us up for one. You guys are our greatest advertisers. Heck, you're our only advertisers. Until next time, I'm your host, Bill Beck, telling you to get out there and have